So, different types of living spaces, urban versus rural. These next couple of lessons, there are lots of key terms. Well, not lots, there are 5 key terms that you absolutely have to understand. The first two are here: urban to rural migration and rural idyll. Make sure you've got these in your vocabulary books. If you haven't already, you should do, because it was the starter. So, the rural idyll is an image that people have of the countryside, and the rural idyll generally includes such things like this. You can see from this screen here: big gardens, clean, unpolluted, a nice community feel, no crime, no traffic, just a couple of pubs and a few little shops, no big old supermarkets or anything like that. Is it true? Is it not true? Well, this is the thing. It's different experiences for different people. The rural idyll doesn't necessarily exist. As I say, it's more an idea, a belief, an idealistic view of what countryside living is. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of people decide to move from urban to rural areas, urban to rural migration, moving from the city to the countryside, looking for this rural idyll. As this picture here says, the reality is sometimes somewhat different here. A lot of people decide to live in the countryside, own a house in the countryside, live there at the weekends, and then commute into the nearby big city to work. So they might own a small flat in the city that they live in during the week when they're working, and then move back to the countryside during the weekend, meaning that this throws up a whole new number of problems for rural areas. Now, the key thing to remember is that urban to rural migration is very much a pattern that happens in MEDCs. It's very, very different in LEDCs for a number of reasons that we looked at here. Urban and rural areas in LEDCs and MEDCs are very, very different. Rural areas in MEDCs, not many shops and services, not much transport, a lot more cars, far less infrastructure in terms of communications, internet access and things like that is sporadic. But of course in the cities, as you know, we have lots of stuff, lots of shops, lots of high-speed broadband, loads of different types of public transport, loads and loads of people. In LEDCs though, also lots of people in urban areas, but lots of poverty. Lots of people living in illegal settlements, shanty towns. Not many services in all areas. Employment is sporadic as well. Yes, some people have jobs, but often they are part of what we call the informal sector, which we'll come back to in a couple of weeks' time. There's some public transport, but not much. Villages, rural areas in LEDCs, very poor public transport, if any. Most people employed, if they are employed in agriculture, poverty is very widespread, disease, poor educational facilities, and hardly any services. Now, because of this, in LEDCs, the opposite of urban to rural migration is the case. In LEDCs, it is rural to urban migration, people moving from rural areas to the city. Why? This is when you need to start talking about things like push and pull factors. In the exam, be aware that they may term these as stresses and strains. Okay, so make sure that you're aware that stresses is just another way of saying push factors, strains are just another way of saying pull factors. So push factors, things that push people out of a place; pull factors, things that about a place that make people want to move there. In terms of LEDCs, you're thinking about push factors being poor education, poverty, not much money, no jobs, disease, less healthcare, stuff like that. Pull factors of urban areas is the exact opposite of those push factors. Better housing, better healthcare, things like that. But be aware that, of course, not everyone, in fact certainly not the majority, who move from rural areas to urban areas and LEDCs find their dream. They don't find a good job. They don't find a nice house. They don't get a decent school for their kids. They often go there and they have to live in squatter settlements like this. Houses and homes that they build themselves, usually on the edge of cities, because they didn't get a job or they haven't got the qualifications or the skills to be able to get one. But why don't they just go back to rural areas? Well, the key thing is that what's the point? They're going back to a place where they've got even less than they have here. And of course, even if there's the tiniest chance that by staying in the city they might get lucky, get a decent job, get some money, then they're going to stay there. Okay, so urban to rural migration, rural to urban migration, rural idle. These are the three key terms that you have to understand. Push and pull factors in LEDCs and MEDCs as well. The reasons why people move from cities to rural areas in MEDCs, and the reasons why the opposite is the case in LEDCs.